you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call this council meeting to order. We have a adoption of the agenda, please,
Move to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
and the adoption of the minutes.
Recommend that council adopts the minutes from the regular council meeting held on February 21st, 2018 as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
2.2, recommendation, council adopt the minutes from the regular council meeting held on March 7, 2018 as presented.
I'll second.
And discussion? See none? All in favor? Introduction of late items?
Thank you, Councilor Evans. 3 late items here, all stuff that came in after the agenda was printed. They're on your wickets. You can read this stuff here, folks, under your agendas.
Okay,
Yeah. So first one, item 8.5 is just the announcement of a grant pool from Prince Rupert Port Authority. That'll be item 8.5. Then there's an invitation to a business networking event, from what I understand. That's item 8.6. And then the last item is item 8.7, and it's a request for a small travel budget for an event in Dawson.
okay, so do we need a motion to accept these, or just?
Yeah, please.
So, can you get a motion to accept these late items?
So move.
I'll second.
And, all in favor? Public hearings, none, delegations?
Recommendation of council to the delegation from Richard Bader regarding the possible disposition of gas rights.
Richard, go ahead, thank you for coming.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks. I'm sure you're all aware, a letter was sent under the mayor's signature indicating some concerns with the proposed disposition, and an invitation to present to council. So what I propose is doing a very quick overview, much faster than I normally would, so there may be questions you have that feel free to ask them as I'm going through. I would assume you, living in this area, you know a lot of things that I don't need to repeat. So I'll go through that very quickly, and then we can discuss, time permitting, the concerns that were relayed in that letter, and the ministry's tools that we can use to accommodate the concerns and ensure that whoever receives the tenure is well aware of those concerns and will plan and engage with the municipality.
Okay.
So we'll just dive right in, unless there are any questions to start. Okay.
I'm not gonna move the coals yet.
So petroleum natural gas tenure. I'm going to go through what tenure means in the context of Crown petroleum natural gas rates, the referral and consultation process, of which you are a part as a municipal government, and then some boring stuff around tenure maintenance. That's not terribly relevant to you. So I don't need to bore you with this. You probably know how this stuff got there. Just very quickly, as of course you well know, the Northeast is the primary sedimentary basin where, which is the most active in British Columbia for petroleum natural gas development. But there are a number of other basins that have potential, and in fact some are even producing such primary, a good example is the Kootenays. That's coal bed methane primarily being produced there presently. There's very little activity in any of the other basins. Okay, so the process that I'm responsible for with the ministry is what we call the referral process, where we refer posting requests. What a posting request is each month we accept requests from interested parties for tenure The interested party will specify the footprint of that tenure and the rights they're looking for. And we do an internal review to ensure those rights are available. And then we refer to stakeholders, and local governments are among those stakeholders, along with First Nations and other agencies, primarily provincial ministries. So we send a package to each of those parties and request any commentary that they choose to provide, whether it be concerns or in some cases it's it's very positive sentiment, and in other cases, as you might imagine, it's not, depending on the area of interest. So we take all of those concerns, we compile them, and then the decision maker, who happens to be the executive director of the branch I work for, will review that information from all stakeholders and consider whether the concerns, if any, have been addressed adequately. And if they haven't been, we continue engagement at that point, or we may decide not to dispose of that parcel. That can happen. It is a possibility. However, the intent is to address concerns. That's our primary goal. So then, once that's been completed, we publish the proposed dispositions, both in the BC Gazette and on our website. And then the industry generally reviews those each month. And it's open to all interested parties to bid. It's a sealed bid process. And the minister reserves the right to dispose or not dispose at that point. Typically, it's the highest bid that is awarded the rights. And there are other factors that could be considered, but it's primarily compensation paid or offered that renders the decision at that point, which is different from the decision point where we're looking at the feedback from our stakeholders. So there are two different elements of the process. Very quickly, this schematic, don't even try to read it, but it represents these zones that have been defined, and this varies from place to place. A proponent can request a set of zones, typically a set of strata, I should say, which make up a zone. So the color coding indicates kind of what you would describe as similar kind of rock. And so a proponent can request either one of those zones or multiple zones. So it is conceivable you could have multiple tenure holders over the same piece of ground. Doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Excuse me, the petroleum and natural gas tenure, as awarded, provides exclusive rights for that entity to explore and produce. Let's see here. Specific rights, yeah. And there are three primary types of tenure that are awarded. The permit is rarely used. The drilling license, as it explains there, is exploratory. So if a company's successful in finding the hydrocarbon, they would have to convert into a lease in order to produce. And as you can see, there are various terms that are associated with each of those types. With both the license and the lease, the terms can be extended if the company is, if the proponent is meeting the expectations of the lease to develop the resource, which generally means they're producing from that, to put it simply, producing from those zones that were a component of the tenure. So a very important distinction here is that the tenure does not provide, or does provide, sorry, as I said, the exclusive rights to that resource, but it does not provide authority to conduct any activity. So we're not authorizing any activity at this point. The Oil and Gas Commission will regulate access and conduct additional engagement consultation with stakeholders at that point. The proponent is not required under our legislation to indicate what their plan is for those lands. That's entirely the Oil and Gas Commission's purview. Okay, so as I said, we send the referral packages out to a variety of entities, including maps, list of the parcels, and our cycle provides a 20 working day response time, but we will extend that as we're doing in this case to ensure that we've properly consulted and addressed concerns. Okay, so we've covered this already.
So do you want to go over the map that was sent to us and kind of explain to us
Sure.
maybe the legend on here and so what the issues with the map that because that's kind of why we asked you here.
Okay,
Is
yeah.
to,
Yeah, absolutely. I was just hoping to give a quick overview, but that's okay. We can dive right into that now.
because we're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
So we kind of,
Okay, I can pull it up on the screen, I think, or do you want to just, do you have
I
copies
have
in front of you?
copies, which there's a spare one here
Okay.
as well.
I unfortunately only brought one, but I do have a digital copy
oh,
here.
you do have it?
I do have a digital copy on the, on here, yeah. Okay, so, oops. Gas rates. Okay,
That's it.
come on.
So that.
Okay, so hopefully that's relatively clear. So, excuse me, what is being proposed is that, okay, the overview is that the gray indicates areas that are already tenured, so tenure's been awarded. The white, as you might expect, is untenured land. So all of the rights are available in that entire suite as I showed you. Typically in your area, as you well know, Montney, and Montney is the target for the vast majority of the enterprise around here now. So what we're showing is that the hatched is private land. We've got some crown land in play here, which is the clear. It's a bit busy.
So is it,
sorry about that.
because the way it looks,
Mhm.
from just a, unknowledgeable eye, is that's the whole village of Pooskooby.
Yeah, you're on top of it.
So,
Now,
so what does that mean? So if a tenure comes, they can't drill in the village of Poos.
no.
But why would you sell a tenure over the village of Poos if you can't drill? You can drill under it from a distance, correct?
Correct.
So-
That is the reason. right
So that's
there.
why.
That is the reason, yeah. And
So how far away, like, can we set the barrier of how far away, or is that something that's preset?
The Oil and Gas Commission has parameters around that. So it is preset in that sense,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean that you couldn't request an additional buffer. So that is a possibility. Our ministry, our legislation doesn't allow us to impose an additional buffer, but we can work with the commission and the proponent. If that would be useful, if that would be,
Yeah, like, I don't know, if we could have some sort of information as to what the buffers would be,
oh yeah, okay.
the timeline, so when is this for, like, so right now you're just sending this out to the governments, as you were saying, and different political beings
Yes,
to see what the feedback is, correct?
correct.
Before it goes to the OCG for sale.
Yeah, well, before it goes to, our ministry handles the entire tenure disposition piece. The proponent will then have to do a separate application to the Oil and Gas Commission. It's a completely independent process.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So is there a timeline that we kind of have to fall in to find out what our issues are?
Yeah, the timeline would normally be a 20-day, but we will extend that, and we have extended that
Mhm.
until we can address the concerns.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, smells, so how far, so we've got, flaring, we've got, noise, we've got, first of all, I guess we kind of need to know what the buffer zone would be and how far the distance.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the commission, because that legislation doesn't apply to my work, but the commission's buffers depend upon the type of development, whether it's a well, gas plant, pipeline, and so on. So it will vary. And they do recognize elements in official community plans, so that's really important. So if, I apologize if you haven't seen the letter again, but I was suggesting that we would emphasize the official community plan in a caveat that would go on to the tenure, to make it abundantly clear that there will be zoning that must be abided by. So that's one of the ways that we can ensure.
Do you know if there is the same thing over top of the city of Dawson Creek?
Dawson Creek.
That was my question too.
That's a good question.
Are they drilling under Dawson Creek? And I think they are.
Yeah, they are.
There are some tenures issued over the municipal boundary, yeah.
Have there any problems? The fact that they have been drilling under Dawson Creek?
Not that I'm aware of. I actually engaged with Dawson Creek on this parcel as well, and they didn't have any immediate concerns. I'm sure they would have told me if they were experiencing any difficulties. And
I would like all the options before we can make a decision on what our concerns would be on what the boundaries are, how far back, if they're gonna, what is in place, and the different options if somebody says they're gonna take the tenure or the whatever it is, and what in regards to those agreements, how far back do they have to drill with, what, I want to know everything that is in place on whatever option that you're gonna offer or put it out as a tender before we can make any decisions. Cause it's like a blank check right now if we don't know how far back, you know what I mean? Does it mean that they can just, in any of these other gray areas, just on our boundaries, start fracking or drilling diagonally or however they do it? Like, we have to know our options.
yes, I agree 100%. Okay, I'll put that together. I mean, it's the commission's mandate, so I may need to bring them into this conversation.
Yes.
That would be appropriate. But I noted that there's a school, roughly in the center or somewhere around
Right,
here.
right about under the 8.
And the commission has a policy of now, I believe it's 1.5 kilometers from schools, no activity. So that would encompass right there.
It's everything.
Yeah. So that's very positive. So I'll gather that together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Who should I submit
do
that
to the council.
The council as through Sandy?
Chris?
Yes.
Through Grant?
Yeah.
Directly to you?
Yeah, Denise would.
Okay. Yeah, I will do that. I'll provide all the regulations, and that will indicate to you what the setbacks, the requirements are for different kinds of activity. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm gonna ask, what can we do if we decide that we want to do a certain thing? How much power do we have as a municipality to either stop this or change it, or do we have that, or basically we don't?
Well,
My question.
the official community plan allows, which is in place,
That's what we can
dictates.
go by?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's your primary tool as a
Okay.
local government. Yeah.
So that, and plus the fact that there's a school there, that's gonna be a factor too.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes, you're welcome.
Very good. Is there anything else that you wanted to?
Unless you have any questions about the process, I mean, I really
Yeah.
skimmed it there, but I think you've got the gist.
Could you send me that PowerPoint?
I sure can.
I wouldn't mind reviewing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we really don't know what our options are.
Right.
Because like you say, there's 3 options, most likely 2 that they're either going to do, but we don't know if they take any option, what the boundaries are, what are they bound by?
Right. Yeah, so there's the regulatory piece, and then the engagement with the proponent allows you another opportunity to express those concerns, and most of the operators in this area seem to be good neighbors that are going to listen to concerns.
Like we had last week, a major fire, just outside of Puscoopi on a drilling rig, or on a lease. Our fire department was a major part in saving equipment and stuff like that. So, having them drilling underneath us, which I know it's not very intrusive, but still it does happen. There is stuff that happens. It's very concerning, I think. I find it's very concerning.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Rose. And I think speaking to that too, that fire, for example, the fire department and the RCMP as a precaution evacuated a 2-kilometer area
Radius.
around the site. So,
Kilometer and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all a Poos.
So we're looking at something that close. If that was a rig just outside of the boundaries, for example, you could be looking at a full-scale village evacuation in a case like that.
Yeah, understandable.
Okay. Just, if you would, maybe,
We need more.
we need more information before, and we're definitely concerned, so,
Yes, put an information package together,
okay.
and I can reach out to the commission right away. I think that's appropriate to, maybe you'd like to have them attend a meeting and explain their regulatory processes to.
That would,
Yeah.
definitely.
And what are our rights as
Yeah.
municipalities?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you for your
Appreciate
time.
it. And you have Chris's information and everything too.
I believe I do, and if I don't, I will. Definitely read it. So I'll get that to you early next week. I'm still traveling the rest of
Yes.
this week, so
Perfect, okay.
thank you, everyone.
And if you want to stay, you can, and if not, you can go, or, it's up to you, it's your
It's not
choice.
snowing yet, I'll stay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then, next we have recommendation 6.2.
The council got the update from MLA Mike Bernie.
Hello, council. Do you mind if I push down?
Yeah, go ahead.
It was very tempting not to jump in and answer some of those last questions for you, but if I can, just if you indulge me just for a moment, as a former mayor of Dawson Creek, before I get into some of the stuff as the MLA. As you saw from that, majority of the zones around the cities, municipalities have already been tenured out. The last couple of ones that you saw there in the white. Now, just a reminder, they're about 3-4 kilometers deep. They've drilled a lot already for years underneath the city of Dawson Creek. In fact, just south of the Canada Event Center, you'll see a rig there that's been there for off and on for a couple of years, and there's one just north of town. Don't forget they drill from about 5 kilometers away as well. So, not to take too much into the last presenter, but just a reminder as your rights too within the OCP, you can't have the drilling activities within the municipality, and it's hard to answer how intrusive something will be, because you actually don't know until the zone is tenured out and a company actually comes in and decides how they're going to
Or what they're
go
gonna
after. They might actually, so don't forget, some of the areas that are already purchased, you can have somebody that's already tenured 2 kilometers away, can buy the zone underneath Poos to be 2-3 kilometers away and still access it. You don't have to be drilling within the zone they tenure out. So just a reminder to them. But really good questions, and as a municipality, if I can help on further clarifications on some of the rules, let me know. But on that, thanks for allowing me to be here today. And so my apologies that you haven't seen me in a little bit. Of course, we're in session in Victoria. So as you know, my travel schedule, usually I'm home on Fridays and partial Saturdays while we're in session from the beginning of February until June. But we're on what's called a constituency week for the next 2 weeks with the Easter coming up. So we get to be home in our ridings and see our friends, family, and get out and talk to people. So thanks for allowing me to be here. I'll save some time, Councillor, if I can, just for questions you might have of me as well, what's going on, because there's a lot of things that are changing in my role now, because of course as the MLA for the South Piece with the BC Liberal government, we're now in opposition. So it creates a completely different scenario for myself on how I have to address issues on your behalf and for the region's. My writing skills and my collaborative skills have had to improve a lot, because that's how we communicate with the NDP government mostly. But a couple of highlights I just want to address for you, and you're probably aware of some of them. With the new budget that the NDP have put out, of course, you'll see over the 3-year plan that they've planned on increasing taxes in British Columbia by just under $8 billion over the next 3 years. So of course, those are things that we're watching. There's a lot of promises and a lot of things that they're trying to afford, and fair enough, there's different approaches on how governments do things. Some of the ones that'll affect municipalities, though, one of the main ones is the new employer health tax. So I'm not sure, as you put your budget together, if you've had those discussions, because with the elimination of MSP, but they're transferring it to an employer's health tax, which is actually going to, in most municipal cases, is actually increasing the tax burden to the local municipalities. So I'm not sure if you've done the math on that yet. So just to flag that for you to consider. For instance, a couple of municipalities I've spoken to have said it equates to about a 2% increase to tax rates in order to cover the increase. So you're going to have to watch for that. And that there is the MSP rates, depending on the employees that you have here and who's on the union being covered under MSP, that was covered before, I assume. The new employer's health tax covers everybody within the organization that's on the payroll, and you have to pay for that. And so at 1.95% on payroll, obviously it can be increased quite a bit to your bottom line. And in 2019, the government is only eliminating MSP by 50%. So you're still going to pay 50% of the MSP rates plus 100% of the employer's health tax. So this year might not be a big hit, but just flagging that for you to watch for next year on how you'll be able to budget for that. The other one that I'm hearing that's affecting people up here, not so much, let's say in Pouce Coupe, but residents, is the new speculation tax. Interestingly enough, the government has put in a 2% speculation tax on what they originally announced was going to be foreign buyers, people to try to address the issue in Vancouver more, people coming in from overseas, buying a house, not living in it, not renting it, holding on to it and flipping it a year or two later for a profit. The problem with the bill, when they put it forward, is it also catches BC residents right now. So if you're and they've zoned things off, so if you're a resident in the Peace region and you own a cottage down south or a chalet at Ski Hill down south, or like a lot of people up here have maybe bought a little condo in Kelowna, you will now be dinged a 2% tax per year on that asset. So for instance, if you have a $600,000 house down there, 2% of that a year is going to be going to the government. So we're, of course, I'm completely against this, and we're trying to challenge that. They're looking at they've been favorably saying they might make some tweaks or changes, because where it's really going to hit is some of the resource areas more, or touristy areas like Kelowna. You have a lot of people who lived in Kelowna that moved to Alberta for work years back, never sold their house in Kelowna, planning on coming back. Well, because they live in Alberta, they're considered foreign, and they now have to pay an additional 2% tax on their house in Kelowna in perpetuity. So we're hearing, obviously, a lot of people who were very upset by this. So just flagging that, it doesn't affect people if they have 2 or 3 homes in this region, only if they own something here and somewhere else as well. So again, that's a provincial thing that's come forward. One of the things I'll flag for you is I'm in constant communication still with the Ministry of Transportation around the 4-laning the Alaska Highway, knowing the concerns that the village has around how that's going to be working through around whatever the plan would be. Again, just to stress, and they stress to me, it is going to be years down the road before they look at this area, because they're still focusing on the high speed, high traffic, high injury rate areas on the highway for now. I'm really pushing them hard on further investments. Again, if you look this year alone, we've had 4 fatalities in the Southeast region. All 4 of them have been youth under the age of 25, and a lot of those look like they've been distracted driving. So the argument there is, would the 4 lanes have helped? I don't know. There's, I think, a lot of things we need to be doing as far as making our roads safer, but also awareness. We have so many people up here still that are speeding, not paying attention while they're driving, and I drive the highways constantly. So.
Regarding the Ministry of Transportation, what about the care of the highways?
So there is, the contract is coming up for all of the road maintenance contractors in the province. And so we're looking at, right now, we being local MLAs are looking at what the new government is putting forward on changes and possible changes and feedback, working with ministry staff. I catch myself, I know a lot of people up here that are concerned with the roads. I catch myself more often than not defending CRS, because when I go out and I look at all of the work that CRS does, in almost every single situation, they're meeting or exceeding the provincial requirements. And so the Ministry of Transportation, anytime there's a complaint goes to them, they go out and investigate and it meets the requirements, so they go to CRS and say you're actually meeting your requirements under the contract. And this just brings in the debate then of not so much, I would say, CRS, because as a company, as an agency who obviously has to stay in business, they need to ensure to keep their contract, they're meeting the contract, otherwise there's penalties. I'm not even aware of a penalty that's been levied against CRS in my 5 years as MLA. When we have these extreme weather events like this year again, it puts a lot of pressure on them, and they've been contracting a lot of local equipment to try to keep up, to make sure they're on top of their contract. But again, it goes to the point, what I won't defend is the contract itself. Because I think we can always look at the differences in the regions, and I've been starting to digest a little bit of the contract and the changes that we can look at doing in the region. And what I mean by that is the amount of snow on the road before they have to plow, et cetera, right?
So is the provincial requirement what needs to be changed then?
Yes. So again, just CRS is meeting the provincial requirements.
Right.
And that's why now, that contract's been there for, I think, 7 years. Right? And they've been meeting or exceeding the contract for the last 7 years. The complaints that I've seen and that we need to address is going to the government, to the Ministry of Transportation, before they do the contract for the next 5 or however many years. When a company bids on that contract, they need to know what they're bidding on. Mm-hmm. And so they need to know what are our requirements, and if we're going to change those requirements, that means that the cost has to go up as well. That means hiring more people, more equipment, et cetera.
And they do have a lot of highways at CRS that they have to.
Yeah, and if you, like I say, I always find myself trying, when I look at this, anytime we have a snow event, they're plowing the equivalent of from Dawson Creek to Montreal. If you think about the length that they have to run. So when some people complain, how come you didn't put the gate down on my driveway? If they did that, we'd only have time to plow the entire community once every month. We wouldn't be able to do it. So again, there's other things we can do around the contract that I'd like to see, which is where they allow more contracts to come in, contractors on the heavy snowfall, but they need to be compensated for it, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, there's a lot of things going on in Victoria right now, like I say, and so being in opposition right now, presently I'm a health critic. There is some rumor don't quote me on this in the paper, there is some rumor this might change, but for now I'm still a health critic. And Barb mentioned to me earlier, like there was an announcement today that the government is going to be putting a bunch of money into reducing wait times for knee and hip replacements, which sounds great. I was doing some provincial media today though, and I said, putting more money into it sounds amazing. If you still have the same amount of doctors and the same amount of surgery time, you're not solving anything. I mean, the issues that we have in our region is we have 2 orthopedic surgeons. They're great, they cover the whole region, but they only get 1 or 2 days a week of surgical time and beds within the hospital because of the restricted space. If they had 3 or 4 days, we wouldn't have waiting lists here. So, anyway, little things like that we need to look at. But maybe if I can, I'll just open it up for any questions that you maybe have of me of what's going on, and just thanks for allowing us to come and see you.
Questions? Go ahead.
I just hope that if they are gonna do that, it's gonna be province-wide, because I think the impact would be felt down south with the increased surgery times, but how are they gonna accommodate it up here?
Yeah, and that is one of the, I guess, the million-dollar questions that we have for them right now. In fact, some of the largest wait times are in Kamloops. And they've got massive, beautiful facility there that they've been putting work on, a new tower being built, and they have some of the highest, lengthiest wait times in the province. There are regions that don't have much of a wait time. For instance, and this is what I've found as I've been looking at this, if you want to go for certain surgeries, from our area, our surgeons are busy, but if you want to drive to Terrace, for instance, you can probably have it done within 3 weeks. A lot of people don't want to drive to Terrace, and they get upset that they have to wait 6 months here. And so, to your point, it's hard to do a cookie cutter approach on this, but we don't want to see all the money just going to a few areas. I'd like to, I mean, for our region, it's not just funding the doctors, it's funding the space so they can have more time.
And the nurses that we need.
Well, and just to flag that, this is one of the challenges we have up here. The last numbers I looked at were about 150 plus nurses short in the Northern Health Authority that they have postings for with vacancies. So we're actually doing really well right now, knock on some wood somewhere, for physicians. If you remember about 2-3 years ago, we went through a lull where we were really hurting. Well, now we've got the exact same thing happening for our nurses. And they're getting burnt out. The amount of hours. I went in for surgery here about 6 weeks ago. Talked to one of the nurses there that was just finishing a 12-hour shift, and they were asked to stay for an extra 6 hours because they were short. So puts an understanding of the stress that they're under as well.
Any other? Just can you quickly, I know that you just said quickly to me about the voting and how they might be trying to change. Do you want to just kind of,
Sure, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, because that's going to be a real negative, in my opinion, for rural BC. And what Councillor's referring to is the referendum that the NDP/Green Party has said that they're going to put forward this fall around proportional representation, a referendum in the province. So right now, as you know, we have what's called a first past the post system. 4 or 5 people want to run to be the MLA. Everybody votes, whoever's got the most wins, and then it's the MLA. Now what they're looking at doing is similar to what they do in some of the African countries, European countries. If it happens in British Columbia, we will be only the 2nd English-speaking place in the world that has a proportional representation model. It's been turned away for so many reasons. If you look at Japan, for instance, uses proportional representation. What it does is it allows everybody and anybody to form a party and run. And then the amount of MLAs that are chosen to be in the House are based on the popular vote, not by the MLAs who got the highest votes. So for instance, in Japan, 27 parties now ran in the last election. And so you could have a party of 2 or 3 people that put their name forward, and the criteria they set is about 2%. So if you get a few percent on the ballot, you are now eligible to have a seat in the House. So 2 things will happen. You either have to, in some countries, double the amount of MLAs in order to meet that criteria, or what they typically do to avoid that is put the countries, but in this case the province, into zones. So the one example they've said would be Williams Lake North would be 1 riding. because of the population. So you could have, what they would then do is say, we're gonna have 3 people, I'm using an example they've shown us, 3 people representing that riding. You'll have 1 person that'll get elected locally, and the other 2 will be appointed by the parties depending on the vote percentage. So what'll end up happening is you don't get to vote on who your MLA is. It'll be appointed by the party. You can have somebody from Surrey representing the northern riding. And they'll look at doing that in order to allow for more ridings and more opportunities in the Lower Mainland. Under the BC Liberal government, we protected 10, we call it protected, however you want to use the wording, 10 of the rural ridings because of the low population. For instance, in downtown Vancouver, my colleague there, the MLA, has 100,000 people in his riding. I've got up here with all of you about 32,000. So according to Elections BC, they should be actually shutting down this riding and amalgamating the entire region into one to try to break it into 100,000 people. My argument to that and our argument was downtown Vancouver, his riding is 6 square blocks for 100,000 people. I'm 36,000 square kilometers for a third of the people. So you have to take that into consideration. The rules in Elections BC didn't allow for that. They just went population divided by so many MLAs, make the lines. So anyway, this fall, there is going to be a referendum. My concern on that is around not only rural representation, but just representation in general in the legislature. Italy just did an election on proportional representation. What it does is it creates, you'll never have majority government, so some people say that's a good thing, but it always creates minorities. So you'll have 3, 4, 5 parties will have to get together in a back room and say, okay, we'll all work together and vote together. The challenge with that we've seen in every other country is there's no point ever making an election promise again of any sort. And people joke that we don't keep them anyway, but that's beside the point. When you get in there, every group and every party has to now say, okay, I'll vote with you if you give me this. And so what ends up happening is everybody's morals go out the window. And that's what we've seen in Germany, in Austria, in Italy. And then to get everybody together to actually form a coalition, one of the countries, I think it was Austria, I'll have to research that, Austria and Italy, it took them over 300 days, so almost a year, to actually have backroom deals until they had enough people saying they'd vote together to pick a premier to actually start leading the government. And that only lasted a year, and then it fell and they went into another election. Germany, under a PR system, since World War II, has had 67 elections and got different governments under a PR system. So you can see the challenges with it. But the Green Party and the NDP are really pushing forward and going to a referendum.
Will they do this referendum about the time that we do municipal elections?
They were going to do it in conjunction with, and they've now announced that they're going to do it separate. So they haven't given a date. We don't know if it'll be before or after. I'm hearing possibly before. The challenge is it's also going to be a mail-in ballot. And to compound the issue, speaking frankly, because obviously I'm against this, to compound the issue, it's not only a mail-in ballot, but they have not allowed for geographical, separate geographical zones for representation. So what that means, what I mean by that is in 2005 and 2008, I think were the years we had referendums in BC on this before, if you remember, it was 60% plus one, but 60% of the ridings in the province also had to pass. And neither of them did. Because you'll have Vancouver will vote in favor of this, but rural BC votes against. And so government of the day said, okay, it's not a clear support for the province, we're not going to do it. The NDP just announced the rules that they're doing. It's 50% plus one with no geographical allowances. So do the math on that. There's 4.8 million people in the province of BC, about half of them are voting age. You could have a couple 100,000 people in Vancouver all vote yes, and you could have every single rural person vote no, and it'll still pass.
How can they change the voting how can they change the voting in midstream?
My tongue-in-cheek comment is anybody that says my vote doesn't matter, this is a perfect example of why it does. The new NDP Green government went into the legislature and changed the rules. And they just passed that and approved it in the House here about 4 weeks ago. They also changed the rules to allow the Green Party, which was 3 members, to be official party status. The rules used to say you had to have more than 4 people elected within the party to have party status. They changed it actually down to 2, so the Greens have 3. They changed it down to 2, so tongue-in-cheek, Dan Davies and I in the North Peace could turn around and start the Peace Conservative Party, and we would officially have party status, and we would officially be a party, and we'd get raises and new offices and everything, which is what they did to the Green Party. So it's,
That's very.
long story short, they changed the rules to allow it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?
I think we're out of time, but.
Yes, yeah, I know,
I'd
it's
like to
all-
ask some questions, but I'll pass.
So what?
We'll
what I
catch you
just-
this week
anyway,
while
please
you're
get-
here.
yeah, please get a hold of me, and anytime, it doesn't have to be official, we can go for lunch, coffee, come to my office if there's any questions you have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Long-winded Mr. Bernier.
See, that's what happened, the rain was here for the.
Yeah, I know. You intro us. We are unfinished business, business rising from the minutes. Recommendation 7.1.
Recommend that council adopts policy 7.3, fire department facilities and equipment as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hear none, call for vote, all in favor? Okay. 7.2 recommendation.
The council adopt policy 8.1, council code of conduct as presented.
Any seconder?
Second.
Discussion?
I would like to table this until Mayor McKinney returns.
Okay,
Yeah, fine.
let's put that. And do we need a, all in favor of tabling that motion?
Sure.
Okay, 7.3 recommendation.
Recommend that council adopt policy 8.2, council benefits as presented.
I'll second.
Discussion?
I'd like to table that until Councilor McKinney comes back.
Oh, jeez. Okay, do we have all in favor of tabling that policy? Yes? Okay.
Did you say Councillor Kenny?
Yeah,
Mayor
Mayor
McKinney.
McKinney, sorry.
What is correct?
Mayor.
Okay,
Okay.
no problem.
New business. 8.1 recommendation.
Recommend that council receive draft policy 8.3, council expenses as information.
I'll second that, and I'd also like for us to table that.
Well, it's just information. It's just as
Oh,
information.
for this one?
Yeah. Okay, so all in favor is just reading as information.
No, I want to discuss it.
Discussion?
Yeah, I want to discuss this because I discussed this with our CEO, and there's an area in here that would really hit us when we go to conventions and that, and so it's under,
This is,
it's pertaining to the,
Page 41, Council.
which one?
Page 41.
Let me go for
it
this
doesn't, on our iPads, what's number?
Yeah,
Meeting outside the
this is
municipality,
going to the
more than
41.
50 kilometers from Goose?
No, it's not that.
If you're
I'm sure that one.
referring to what we spoke about over the phone.
Oh, so you're here? So,
What number is
Section
it,
12.
Seal?
D,
D?
12D.
Oh, here we go, yeah. So the per diem include the cost of any meals not provided for. What I'm getting at here is if you look at the, for conferences like UBCM and the LGN, the conference we're going to be seeing going to Port Nelson, just as a reference, the cost of the banquet at UBCM last year was $90. And I know that because I paid that for my wife. We didn't have to pay it. But according to the way this is reading, we would have to pay that $90. So that basically shoots one per day a DM. And my thoughts here is that we should add a number E, letter E, and mention that this doesn't apply to some of the conferences that we go to, that are major ones. We only go to a couple, right? And so that, if you can explain that,
Yep.
Chris.
Thank you,
maybe
Councillor
explain it to me.
The extent of the discussion over the phone was that, to prevent a situation where a single meal at UBCM, for example, is $90. Because under the language here, it says that the cost of the meals will be deducted from the per diem if the municipality's already paid for the meals up front. And that was one of the 2014 to 2015, I think, audit findings where, there was some duplication of expenses there for that item. So Councilor Lavoie and I discussed it, and it seems reasonable to put a line in there that says for those big banquet items, that those be excluded from the deduction. Personally, from a finance standpoint, I kind of view those more as a networking thing than a meal anyways, so perfectly acceptable to finance if council wants to move in that direction.
So I just want to add that in there if I can.
Okay, so we'll bring this back to next council meeting,
Yeah, that's
and
fine.
we'll
Just add
get a
that.
chance, yeah,
Feel good? Thank
and
you.
everybody can look at it and maybe think about that. Okay, Chris?
Thank you, Councilor Evans. With that in mind, am I free to then add that line, item E, and we'll bring it back with this letter?
Yeah.
Yes, let's do this.
Okay,
Wanna vote on it?
so that's just as an information, right?
We'll still vote on it, right?
Well, we're gonna bring it back for information again, aren't
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, so we'll just bring it in, and so once we bring it back, then we will have a vote as to the changes, and
we?
no
You'll
one?
have your mind.
Yeah.
We still vote for it now, my understanding is? As he amended?
Now as in what, that we,
Just.
That we're gonna add B and what we just talked about.
okay, so all in favor of adding line E? Are you need a motion? on the
I'll make that
table?
motion,
Okay,
yes.
I have a question.
go ahead.
Has Mayor McKenny any questions on this expense?
It's coming back though.
Well, it's coming back. We're not voting on it.
We're
We're
not
not
voting.
voting on it.
Okay,
We're just
We're
voting
just-
on
it's coming
adding
back.
line E.
okay,
Just amended and then it'll be brought back at the next meeting.
okay, I misunderstood.
Okay, so all in favor of bringing it back to next council? Okay. 8.2, recommendation that council adopt the economic development, sorry,
Council adopt the economic development action plan from Urban Systems as presented.
I'll second.
discussion. Chris, do you have?
Thank you, Councilor Evans. Nope, nothing to add. I
Okay.
did verify with
With that?
Wayne that the plan's good to go. And then council will note the money in the capital special project plan for this year is to carry on some of the action items inside and on the list.
Okay, so all in favor? 8.3, recommendation that council receive report on,
I recommend the council receive this report on policy rewrite project as information discussion.
I'll second.
any discussion on this? So I have a question. So this is what I was discussing last council meeting, about the policies and some of the new ones and some of the old ones. So this is a list of all the ones that you're going through currently.
Yeah, that, thank you, Councilor Evans. That, so when that discussion took place at the last council meeting, I discussed it with the corporate officer. Rather than bringing back all of those policies that council adopted between the time the project started in, I believe, October 2016 to now, we thought we'd bring back the comparative lists instead. So what we can see on those comparative lists, the first one being the list of old existing policies that the village had. And then the other one being the list of new redrafted policies. So we're in the, we're well into the throes of the project, so to speak. And in fact, we're at about 95% completion. So what the intent of that was to address some of Councilor Evans' concerns. If there are any specific policies in there that you guys would like me to bring back for, again, whatever reason, additional discussion, keep in mind these are your policies, folks. So You know, if there's anything you want to question, revisit, look at again, change, just for information, definitely let us know. We're more than happy to bring those back for you. But certainly, as you can see, comparing the two lists, our new set of policies is approximately 3 times what the old set of policies were. So that does give us a lot more clear operating guidelines to ensure the fair, open, and transparent government that council mandates for the municipalities.
Okay, so do we need to have so this is just information, so, correct? So we don't need to vote?
Yeah, correct.
So if we're bringing it back?
Yeah, if there's something you guys would like me to bring back, then perhaps put that to a vote, but aside from that, yeah.
Okay, so just all in favor of having this as information for now?
Okay.
And recommendation 8.4.
Recommend the council receive the budget proposal for general government, environmental health, public health and welfare, and recreation for discussion.
And this is all you?
This is all me. Okay, thank you, council. So on your wickets, I've provided some additional background information. I've got a PowerPoint that's loading here on this as we speak. But the documents I draw your attention to are 3 for purposes of the budget. First one, just a revisit of the capital and special projects list. This is the amended one, just in case you had any questions throughout the presentation. And then also I've included the copy of the museum budget, and then also a copy of the library budget. Those 2 lines are going to be coming up in the presentation. These 2 budgets did not form part of the agenda, they're just on table items. On that note, I will get to talking. All right, so the agenda for tonight's presentation, this is the 3rd one, as you guys all know, in the process here so far. Now we're starting to dip into the operating budget, which is our recurring year-over-year costs. Like last year, I'm breaking it down into segments, and the ones we'll be seeing here tonight will be general government. Some of the titles are a little bit confusing, so I've put in parentheses what exactly that means inside the budget book. So general government's going to encompass admin, finance, and town hall operations. Environmental health is going to be garbage and recycling. Public health and welfare is animal control, bylaw, and cemetery. And recreation is going to be Poos Park operations, museum, library, and then the various celebrations. Before we dip into that though, I'm just going to take 2-3 slides here to speak to some changes that we're doing in the budget system overall, and then introduce you guys to a quick snapshot of the Municipal 360 software that we've purchased, which we'll be using in subsequent years for the budget. So first one, budget in general. We're still in the process of implementing the full capital and special project dedicated GLs. So I had wanted that to be done in 2017. Didn't quite happen to the extent I wanted it. But it will be done 100% for 2018 and moving forward. And what that means is everything you guys see on the capital and special projects list is going to have its own account now going forward for better tracking, better transparency, and then better year-over-year comparisons. So right now we still have some of the items approved by council that are finding their way into the operational GLs, and the computer cost is an example of that. Typically that's just for the leases and general computer expenses, but ironically enough, the Municipal 360 software has made its way to the computer costs because we didn't have a dedicated GL for that. So we're going to try and prevent that going forward. Looking at that budget software, this is a screenshot from what Municipal 360 looks like. So compare that to what you guys have seen in the agenda, which is basically a line by line, just a budget. When I'm building that budget, I've actually got to constantly be going back to Maze and printed versions of the trial balance to look at history and where the actuals were. The new piece of software in a single line gives me all of that information and then some. So what it is, new GL code, which we're creating as part of the process, compare that to the old one. There's a section in here for notes, so myself, future finance officers, 5-10 years down the road, can open this up and reference back 2018 and see what happens. Maybe we're in 2025 by this point. So it's a good way for organizational memory and history. We get the budget amounts going forward, but part of the important thing too is we also get the historical actuals. So this year's are unaudited actuals. Everything else past that, these are the actual audit numbers. So it really helps from a budgeting standpoint where we can see what the accounts have done in the previous years right then and there, and then plunk in new budget numbers going forward. So it's going to save finance department a ton of time in presenting the budget. Plus it'll be, much richer information as well. So right now the work plan, what you guys see in front of you is, we're still working off of the old system. The reason being is because we're recoding the GLs and we're trying to move to a whole new budget system. I didn't want to fully start doing things in the new budget system in case there was an error or something's missing. So what I'm in the process of doing is doing everything under the old system so that we've got easy comparisons from last year to this year. Once that's all done, adopted by council, I'm going to take all that information, move it over into the new one, and then make sure all the numbers match up. And then once we've done that, then we've got a baseline and we can start using the new one going forward. Looking at the budget sections, now we're actually getting into the meat and potatoes, so I've got reference points for the various sections, folks. So right now we're on to page 79 to 80. So that first section is general government. So we're forecasting a savings in general government of about $21,000 here for the year. Cumulative savings since 2016 of about $200,000. And areas of note for general government and the way we've been able to achieve those savings is I'm proposing retaining the joint CAO-CFO role. We're looking at adding one permanent position here with Mr. McInnes. So that'll be in addition to Sam when she comes back from her maternity leave. I'd like to keep Alistair on with the team here. We're adding 10 hours to the finance clerk to take on a little bit of some of the softer administrative burden in finance. And then, once that happens, or if council approves that, I guess, we're looking at doing 50-50 with Sam's role, and I've already discussed that with her. So then it's going to be sort of joint finance and administrative role. Also, part of the reason for that is to cover some of the union mandated items such as breaks, vacation, that type of thing. Right now with our the structure we have at the moment, or previously with Sam, we weren't 100% meeting the mandate in the union manual because it's supposed to be unionized individuals at the front counter. So when lunches happened, when breaks happened, there were gaps there, people were filling in here and there, so a little bit of a net benefit there. Even with all of those changes, we're still forecasting a net savings in the area. Then you'll notice when you look at the sheets, we're also forecasting decreases in the legislative and bylaw lines. So bylaw costs have been moved over to another area. We're increasing the legal line slightly due to the Peterson thing that's bubbling up here right now. We're increasing the computer line a little bit for 2018 to match some of the historical actuals. We overshot that budget a little bit. And then we're adding 10,000 for the election, and we're decreasing our advertising expense. What that looks like in a graph is the following. So you can see here, 2016, we were running about 855,000 in that department. For this year, we forecasted about 754. So pretty significant savings over that 2-year period. Smorgasbord of numbers. This is where all that stuff comes from. So we can see our 2017 number down there. I didn't put the other column for comparison. It would have made it even worse than it is now, but some of those areas I touched on in terms of the additions and subtractions. Our $10,000 line there for the elections. Small increase in staffing just due to the shuffling around. But where we really saw net savings was not having that full-time CFO position. We were at about 80 grand a year doing that, and well, I'm getting a lot less than that for it. But we had administration contracting. We realized a small savings, and then that little bit of extra computer costs. The big one, like I mentioned, is our advertising expense. Advertising has been something I've been looking at really, really closely for the municipality over the last few years. We were spending big dollars to advertise in publications that weren't necessarily driving visitation, tourism, net benefit to Poos. One of those, for example, was the Destination BC magazine, where we had a $5,000 full-page ad, and it was sitting in airports in Kelowna. So when I looked at that from a management standpoint, you know, as nice as that was, and as nice as it is to have out there, nobody flying in and then stopping over in Kelowna from Germany, picking up that magazine and saying, oh, Bruce, I gotta alter my travel plans and go there. So, you know, we scaled that back. We turned it from a full page ad into a little, you know, quarter page, or a little corner ad, more reflective of what we've got. We then looked at our advertising and started focusing it more locally, saying, well, you know, somebody from Kelowna is not going to cancel their travel plans for wherever they're going to come here specifically, but yes, somebody in Chetwynd, Tumblr, Dawson is very likely going to come here if they know we've got something to offer. So we've actually looked at focusing our advertising more on those areas. This is your opportunity for discussion in those sections, Council. So there'll be 4 more of these throughout the presentation. Any questions on this, folks?
Our esteemed, like Bernier there was saying about the MSP plan, so this is gonna have to change because of that alone?
Yeah, potentially.
Your MSP,
Yeah, I crunched that number while Mike was speaking, Councillor Evans, and our payroll for any given year is around the $800,000 mark. So he threw out a number of about 2% in addition to that, so we're looking at maybe 16 grand. No, sorry, it wasn't 2, it was 1.59% for that, 2% for the house tax. So yeah, somewhere between 12 to 16,000. It'll have an impact, not a huge impact, but I'll definitely include that up in the benefits line up here. Make sure that's captured.
any questions on? No?
Okay, moving on. Section number 2, environmental health. Information on that's contained on page 81. This again is that category is almost entirely our recycling and garbage collection. Moderate savings in that category for 2018. It's basically comprised of vehicle expenses and wages, so there's not a lot of areas that I can look at compressing the budget. It takes the amount of time to collect the garbage that it takes. So, and as I got the note there, it's just a few savings in some small areas. Graphically speaking, though, over the last couple of years, there still has been a noticeable savings in that category. So we're looking
But
at
that's because we're setting up. It costs a lot to set up for recycling and the trucks and the bins and the,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so there was some upfront costs there. Yeah, and again, there's not much
You know, we
compression.
bought all the
you can
bins,
see.
we bought the truck, we bought,
And that actually, that's a great point, Councillor Evans. That comes back to that wanting to separate out the capital and special projects in future years. All those costs you're referring to in those separate costs are actually embedded in here right now. So it's making year-over-year comparison very difficult. When we purchased all of those bins, they made their way to this operational category. If they didn't, we'd have a much more easy to read comparison for year-over-year. So.
I'm sorry, I back to the policy. Did we have a policy on the bins and people damaging and repairing and cost and that kind of stuff?
There is.
Sorry, just because we're talking about the bins and the replacement.
Yeah. Alistair, can we make a note of that, please? There is, I'm drawing a blank on it right now. The garbage bylaw speaks to the bins.
I did, I'll have a number on
remember
it.
that.
I know, but repairing and who pays?
The residents.
Yeah,
Or
there is.
sure.
Did we have a policy?
Residents pay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just,
The bins are offered for $100 each, and it's more of a deposit than
Yeah.
a sale really, so, yeah. So these are the numbers for that category, again, environmental health. Like I mentioned, small incremental savings over a couple of areas. This recycling GL, I haven't actually been able to see exactly what that GL was being used for. I guess there's a typo in it. Last year, we charged $50 to that account, and it was just a single invoice, so I've just lowered that. If we don't use it again this year, I may eliminate that GL altogether.
would that be, if we were charged for the recycling, so if we're not putting the right garbage and right stuff in and we're getting billed extra, would that not be for that?
The fines and stuff?
The fines or?
We probably look to put that in the dumping fees, although it could be in there too. I mean, when we run the trial balance on our accounting system, There's probably a good 100 accounts that we have that are dormant that haven't seen charges to them. And there's two ways to run that trial balance. One is a full trial balance that has numbers, stuff that we've used recently. The other one's a trial balance that has every single account. So they're still out there, but it's not uncommon to see that kind of thing happen to, where, you know, the small balance GLs. It's just easier for staff to put it into something like that.
Sorry,
go ahead.
is there repair costs or
Yeah.
is there?
Yeah, we've got two GLs there. This one too, we've got it separated out to recycling and garbage. I believe it's the same truck, so, you know, in theory, those should be combined. Looking at the cost that went into them, they weren't astronomical, so we've been able to.
So that'll get us new tires, and that'll get us new cylinders, and that'll get us new.
When that kind of stuff bubbles up, if it's tires and cylinders and things that we see happening or see coming up front, generally these are just for repair and maintenance type of items. Tires we probably look to have, you know, in the capital and special projects list and that type of thing. Tires are a long-lived asset on the vehicle. Some of the CPA, or not CPA, public sector accounting standards rules changed with respect to what we amortize on vehicles. So used to be if somebody had an engine that failed and it was $10,000, it was just lumped into repairs and maintenance. Now, if that engine is going to be in a long-lived asset, there's actually a requirement to amortize the engine and the rest of the truck separately. So it gets to be a little convoluted, but it's there nonetheless. But yeah, not a lot to really change or move around in that category. Any questions on that?
Okay.
Public health and social welfare, also on page 81. Animal control and bylaw in everyday English language. Forecasted decreases there of approximately 28,000 and some change from 27. That is mostly due to the bylaw contract role being moved into Public Works and the fire department under Blair. We did decrease the animal control supplies here this year as well. We hadn't been using the balance in that GL for some time. Les's operations is mostly stopped. And then at council's request, there was the removal of the step up and ride, the donation line. So graphical representation there, pretty big savings over those 3 years. Looking at the actual GLs, yeah, so that's the difference between the former, there was one GL for Les and the contract bylaw officer. Again, the bylaw officer contract costs have been removed. Animal control supplies, we had a really healthy balance in that. We weren't even coming close previously, so I've lowered that down to 3,000. The bylaw line here is for the 5% of Blair's wages that are now allocated to bylaw, and then we've got a little bit of benefits associated with that too. Building inspections, we were able to lower that quite a bit because our new contract with the Peace River Regional Districts for about $4,600 to $4,800 for TED services, so no more billing by the visit that was happening under the previous agreement, so we should realize some savings there. And then, yeah, just the step up and right amount. I did increase the cemetery repairs line a little bit just for some of the stuff that we've discussed about the cemetery.
Questions about?
Good to go. Last but not least, recreation. Page 82 for the numbers there. This is one that's bucking the trend a little bit, where we're forecasting some increases over 2017. There's a reason for that though. There was an error in the 2017 budget inputs. So about $15,000 of council approved budget wasn't actually captured in the Maze accounting system. So when I do the trial balance printout, it's showing our approved budget amount without that line in there. That was actually the line for all the truck light parade, the 85th barbecue, and the Xmas party. So those projects were approved by council. We know that had happened in open meeting, but for some reason, when Adam uploaded the budget numbers, Maze didn't catch that. So it is what it is. Even after accounting for that little bit of missing info, the budget is still forecasted to increase slightly for a couple of reasons. We're looking at adding the recreation coordinator here to that section now, as opposed to the capital and special projects that we had it in last year. We know WCB wasn't willing to approve the recreation coordinator as a standalone contract job. They had the reasons for it. I argued with it. There was no change. So the only way we're gonna get that rec coordinator now, it looks like, is if we bring them on as an actual staff member. There's some risks associated with that, and we can speak to that later, but it's in the budget here as it is now. There's a small increase, there's a small increase in the library budget of $2,000 over last year's budget amount. And there's an increase in the museum budget. And the increase in the museum budget is actually pretty significant. They're proposing going from $35,000, which was budgeted for last year, to $47,000 here this year. Partly due to the need for a bookkeeper to run their operations, because the new individual that's been hired doesn't have the training to do the bookkeeping and payroll for the museum like the former curator did. So something for council to be aware of. And we've also increased the Canada Day amount. So last year's budget for Canada Day was $35,000 approved by council. We ended up overshooting it by about $1,200, so it came back at about $36,200. From what I understand, we're looking at keeping that size scope of event going, so we increased the budget from 35 to 40 for this year. So we should be able to put on a similar Canada Day event that we did last year. Councillor Smith?
Did we increase our grant for the Canada Day? Was there a change that
Yeah.
we have an increase for a grant?
Great question. We submitted the new Canada Day budget, even though council hadn't approved it yet. The deadline was looming. I believe it was the end of February. So we submitted that as $40,000, and I forget the agency off the top of my head. Long story short, they've suggested we could be able to get up to $10,000 of the Canada Day celebrations back. Like all of this stuff though, when we're doing our budgeting, those PSAT accounting requirements force us to account for both sides of the ledger. So we have to show all the expenses and then the grant. We're not allowed to net out the two amounts and say, okay, well our budget's 40, we know we're getting a grant of 10, so really we're only spending 30, that's what we'll show. That's actually not permitted under public sector accounting standards. So it's the two lines at the very end, expenses and revenue, that have to match. So even though we could be getting a grant for 100% of something that's happening, we've still got to show what that expense, how much the municipality is going to write the check for.
Chair, can I ask a question? In regards to that grant for the Canada Day, there is a condition, right? And I don't know if you know it or not, but Mayor Ackerman told me what it was, and it's basically you need to have a bilingual person that speaks French,
Okay,
and I will be offered to do that.
okay, sure. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember the Heritage, I forget the name of the grant agency. It wasn't just the standard NDIT like we typically apply to, but in seeing the information, we'd applied for them before. The old grant writer didn't make that application. Yeah, they said that the information they had about what we had going on with Canada Day that Sandy, Andy and I submitted over to them, they'd never seen before. So they were under the impression, under the old approvals, that our Canada Day was just for the Old Goose, 690 people, according to the BC stats, and that it was really just a small scale Canada Day, nothing's going on. So we let them know that, no guys, this is actually a big regional deal. We do the Canada Day for Dawson, and then we've actually got a service area for this thing. We're talking, 12, 13,000 people. And they were ecstatic to get that information. Nobody ever let them know that before. So they felt that would help encourage approval of that grant. So we'll see where it goes. Good news is with the recreation still over that same 3-year period, 16, 17, and 18, we're still showing a modest decrease over 2018 levels. But again, an increase versus last year. Numbers on the recreation side. So yeah, Poos Park, this isn't any of the capital and special projects, it's just general Poos Park maintenance, upkeep, our wages that we do to cut the grass and that type of thing are there. We've got a $5,000 fund for the recreation coordinator. When that person comes in, that'll be buy soccer balls or whatever that individual feels, or, the recreation programs, likely for advertising and stuff like that. I'd like to keep as much of those costs inside that GL as we can. Recreation facility expenses, I was able to lower. We weren't using that full $5,000 balance. And then you can see the coordinator wages and benefits there. Community center expenditures, I was able to lower too. We weren't using the full balance of that former GL. Small library increase. Tourism, this is just our tourism publications as well. And then the museum one, like I mentioned. So on a percentage basis, that's give or take 30% increase to the museum's budget. Special events, Canada Day, and then this was that line where we were missing the dollar amount from last year. And yes, we put the volunteer banquets in there. No?
Okay,
Okay.
keep flying.
Wrapping it all up, cumulative effect over those last 3 years. So in 2016, the sum total of all of those categories netted out to about 1.327 million. This year, 2 years out, we've been able to compress that budget by a pretty significant amount. So we're at about 1.111. On a graphical scale, sort of looks like that. So this, and I know I've mentioned it to you folks before too, that, in looking at those budget compression exercises, and when somebody's really willing to go through each of those GLs line by line, if there's savings possible, it tends to be on a sort of hockey stick shaped graph, if you will, where the savings, the work will realize savings over the first couple of years while you're really actively managing the expenses, and it's going to level off. And if you project these graphs forward over a long period of time, then we actually start seeing some modest inflationary increases. If service levels stay the same, if council chooses to add things like positions and recreation coordinators and that kind of stuff, then it can start to slope upwards. But really, trying to actively manage those budgets, it's not something that can keep happening into perpetuity. So there's a very, very unlikely likelihood that 2 years from now, I show you guys a graph and whoops, all of a sudden we're down here at 900,000. That kind of decrease can't happen. Eventually you hit a floor level, and that's about as far as you can cut. So
Is that it for you?
that's it for me.
Oh, geez. That was actually very good, thank you.
Welcome.
So anybody have any questions for Chris and our fabulous budget? So are we passing the budget, or is this just information?
So the budget process, we've got to do the budget by law. Nothing in the budget is adopted, etched in stone until the fourth and final reading of the bylaw. So what we're doing here under that sort of segmented process is we're looking at little bits and pieces, and then the way I've written the recommendations and the motions for council are to approve it in principle, the way it's presented, or with any changes from council, into that final budget bylaw document, and then you guys will have a final read of the whole thing as a complete package and document. So what you basically be approving here, if everybody's okay with everything that's on there, is that I take that information and transpose it line by line into the final version.
The only thing I really have is you said you're decreasing less is because you've got fire chief going as bylaw. So where is the increase in the wage showing for the increase for fire chief bylaw?
Yeah, good question. So the bylaw, Councilor Evans, is just that little, when we looked at Blair's wage, the three sort of roles that he's doing right now, the primary bylaw officer, I'm also one of the bylaw officers for the municipality, but so we allocated 5% of his wage to bylaw, 25% to the fire chief, which was approved on the fire chief budget sent to the PRRD before Christmas. The remaining 70% is going to come up at the next budget meeting, so it's in public works.
Okay. So does anybody want to make a motion to approve this portion of the budget?
I'll make a
or-
motion, we approve this portion of the budget.
I'll second.
We had discussion, any other discussion on this? No, so call it all in favor or call vote? Okay. Fly at it, Chris. Okay, correspondences. Do we have to go every line, or does it just everybody see something?
Do we have
Go- sorry,
8.5
go ahead.
then?
Oh, sorry, yes, thank you. So late items, 8.5. Are these just information?
I can, the first two, Councillor Evans, I would suggest that council might want to pass those for information, although perhaps not 8.6. It is an invitation to attend this networking event that's happening in Prince Rupert with the new shipping terminal. Not sure that that's something council's going to want to do. We do need to know if anybody wants to attend that by March 23rd. The first one, is really just, this may be something the council might want to direct us to just put on our website, because the Prince Rupert Port Authority has opened up a $250,000 fund available to small, medium-sized businesses to be able to create new export markets, outside of the region. Seems pretty interesting. 250,000 might get eaten up pretty quick, but it's not exactly a deep slush fund, so to speak. But we could easily put that on the website if you guys want it. And then the last one will require a vote.
Okay, so can we get a motion to pass the first two as information?
I make the motion.
I'll second.
And discussion on the first two? No, call vote. Call the vote. Vote on as information. There would be. Ray, Andre, call vote as information.
Yeah, just looking at the second one, actually.
Sorry.
I didn't get it.
And then late item 8.7.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that council approve the registration fee of $20 for each council member that is interested in to register for the luncheon April 4th, 12 to 1 George Dawson Inn, but the Chamber of Commerce.
I'll second.
Discussion. I'd like to actually attend this.
I would like to attend to this.
Yeah.
I might be able to attend that too, so if you do that.
It's just new, it's very March. It's from 12 to 1. From Solid.
All done?
Whatever. Lorraine too, she's gone.
Yeah, okay.
We'll just say she.
Yeah.
Okay? Huh? All in favor, vote? We had to say who's going first.
We're all,
We're all going.
yeah.
We just decided Colleen's taking next to that.
Gee. Sorry. We are correspondences. Is there anything in here that anybody would like to discuss?
I think so. Madam Chair, I'd like to, 9.1, the council received the invitation to 13th Annual Community Coal and Energy Forum as information. I'd like to see someone go to this. I went to it in Tumble Ridge this last time, and it was really good. And I think we should support this for Chetwynd. It's in Chetwynd, so it's not far away, right? So it's not like it's going to cost, it won't cost any hotels or anything. We should be able to travel there and come back.
Okay.
I don't believe it.
It is a 2-day event. Councillor.
Yeah. But do you have to go to both days?
Good question.
I don't think so. I would like to make a motion on the floor that if any councillor, mayor, councillor would like to attend, that they would let staff know so that they can be registered.
Do a
I'll
second? All in favor? Okay, and we'll get back to you as
Yep.
to who is wanting to attend. We'll have to check some dates, I think. Anything else that anybody sees here? Go ahead, yes, please, Chris.
Just on item 9.3, in talking to the mayor prior to the meeting here, the council will note that these cannabis revenue sharing agreement letters seem to be recurring on almost every agenda now, so it's gaining traction. She did want me to pass on the message that she's aware that this has been raised through the mayor's caucus, and it has been escalated to the province by them, so kind of as a union. She believes though that the mayor's caucus only asked for a third instead of the 50% that some of the municipalities are proposing, so. Just
Okay. Okay, anything else, anybody? No? Okay, resolutions? None, bylaws, none. CAO report.
my turn again?
This is all you again.
Alrighty.
You're talking a lot.
Where am I going to go?
Sandy isn't here.
She told me ahead of time, so. Item number 1 on the CAO report is skate park design. So that item was, of course, included here. It wasn't included for pre-approval, but I have been doing a little bit of the background work looking into it already. I've come across a company called the Canadian Ramp Company based out of Toronto who actually offers a design service. So for $4,900 plus tax, they'll actually work with me and then you folks as well to come up with a preliminary design. You know, we know from the presentation what we think we want that to look like. Part of the reason I'm going to suggest that to council too is that'll prevent us from having to do something called a design build construction contract, which means we'd send it out to an RFP and we'd be asking the companies responding not only to design the potential park but also build it. It makes it very hard to compare apples to apples. Some of them are going to have ramps on one side and, you know, we won't be, and really at that point it'll be their vision as opposed to ours. What I'd like to suggest to council is that we actually take this company up on their design offer. Then that way we can come up with a design, layout, scope, size, all of that good stuff. And once we have that, then we can actually go out for a tender instead, which should mean we get a better price on the skate park too, because we'd be asking every company that bids on it, assuming council approves the project, to be bidding on exactly the same thing. And we can make a much more informed decision at that point. So given the size and scope of the project, I think it'd be $5,000 well spent. So if council is open to that idea, I'd like to give these guys the green light and start working on that. Our construction window to get this project started is quickly approaching, so the sooner we can have that design, the better. If we skip that step and wait till the end of the budget and then go out, we're probably looking at 4 weeks before we get a solid design back. Anyways, we may have missed the construction window for 2018 on that project.
Have we reached out to any of our kids with skateboards in the village to ask what they want? Could we do a 2-week, like do our plans now, but put something in the newsletter saying, you know, if you ride a skateboard, let's hear from you, what you want. It's not necessarily that they'll get what they want, but then we can sort of feel out what the kids are looking at.
That's a great suggestion, guys. If that's part of the $5,000 package that these guys offer, it's 2 community engagement seminars, so with local kids. These facilities are called skate parks, and they started off 15, 20 years ago as skateboard parks. Anybody who's ever been to one recently knows that that's actually expanded now. And skateboarding is actually on the, it's on one of their cyclical, it's the scooters that are, kids love these scooters because they're so easy to ride. Yeah, bikes being a second. So despite the name skate park, skateboarding is actually probably only going to be 10 to 15% of what's happening there. It'll be kids on scooters and bikes, but nonetheless, still an opportunity to send it out to those kids and those parents.
So I'll make a motion that we go ahead with this, what was the company name?
It's Canadian Ramp Company.
Canadian Ramp Company, to get them to make a design for us. But we have to make sure that they know that we live in the north and that there's northern issues. We have weather.
Cement.
We have weather.
I'll second.
I get a
Wait a second.
30 second.
And all in favor?
Thank you, Council. Okay, so item number 2 is we've got Peace River Regional District has approached us about renting the community center on April the 4th for a community engagement for Director Hebert of
April 9th.
April 9th, yeah. Sorry, April 9th,
April
yeah.
9th, yeah.
I'm just wondering if council would be okay waiving the community center fees for those folks?
I'd like to make a motion that we waive
Sure.
the fees for the Peace River Regional District to use our, they have contributed to our community
Sure.
center,
I
so
second.
it's as much there as this.
All in favor?
Okay, thank you, council. Worked on the employee benefits presentation. Some of this was in the last CAO report. Did deliver the benefits presentation to staff. All but one staff member were in favor. Looks good for the most part, potentially switching from Blue Cross to Great West Life. So now that staff's kind of let their opinions be known on it, I would like to present the information to you guys. There is actually a noticeable benefit or increase in benefits to council by making this switch. There's also potentially a $9,000 a year savings in the benefit plan to the municipality, so sort of a win-win. Theoretically, administratively, CFO, we could have just done that with the stroke of a pen, just on budget savings, but because this kind of affects people in their personal lives, I wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to discuss it. So as soon as you guys have some time, let me know. It's something I'd like to move forward with if we can. Several callbacks or calls back and forth with Hub about the cracking that I mentioned to you guys in the building here. Trina and I both tried rather extensively to get a hold of the engineering firm that did the design. Long gone. Can't track them down anywhere. Maybe they've retired. We don't know. All of those calls have resulted in disconnected numbers. I even went as far as calling the city of Grand Prairie and seeing if there was a business license under that contract number. They haven't had anything. So I tried to make an insurance claim for it. The rep at the insurance company came back and said it's probably not something that falls under our policy. It's not actually an event. It's just a deterioration of the building, they think. So she suggested that we go through the standard engineering channels and potentially legal channels to try and find out where this company is. So the other thing she mentioned was that our policy, our insurance premiums are up $3,000 this year versus previous years, partly because of the claims that the Village of Poos has put in over the last few years. Those would be for Poos Park and then also the roofs. So there's, $350,000 of claims have gone through Hub. So what Laura actually mentioned to me was that the last 13 years that we've been with them, the premiums now have been eaten up by a margin of 2.5 to 1. So they're actually in the hole on the relationship with Poos. I said, oh, geez, does that mean we're going to get kicked off? She said, no, that's what we're here to do. But she did caution us that we want to be careful putting in future insurance claims, depending on the size, of course, because if Hub decides to stop looking at us for this reason, and we're sub-insured through Sun Alliance, it could impact our ability to get future insurance. So other companies, look at us and say, well, we can't take this on, it's a losing proposition from day one with all the claims. So something to make council aware of. What that means when, if and when we have little events that are insurance claimable, I might come back and recommend to council that we pay for it out of our own pocket rather than making insurance claims. Obviously, if a building burns down and it's $200,000, I'm not gonna make that recommendation, but somebody, drunk driving accident takes out, build or not a building, but a fence or $5,000 to $10,000 expenses, I'd probably recommend to council that we cover that of our own resources before going and making any more claims for a few years. Went with Blair and reviewed the efforts to clean up the ditches. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we're definitely scooping them out. The water's filling up as fast as we
My ditches haven't been done.
No, we haven't done every ditch in town, Councilor Peppersmith. We talked about that. We didn't have the time and the resources. So what we did was we went to the map on in the back of Town Hall here, and we looked at the problem areas from last year and tried to scoop those out first, just to keep the water in the area. So,
Okay, there's a pattern though from Ben Dumays to my direction, up to my driveway.
okay.
If there's any obstruction in that flow, which they have piled snow in there, it backs up on Ben Dumays.
Okay.
And I'm just noting, for living there 15 years, I don't want it to go back on Ben's.
And that's 57th, I think it was.
Yeah.
Okay, we're looking
Not
good.
bad.
We're already well underway with the Canada Day celebrations. You guys saw the new budget proposal. Thanks for looking at that. So we're looking at increasing the number of inflatables. We also talked about changing the location of the fireworks. So this issue with CN that came up over the last 2 weeks about the snow dump has made me realize that we might not have had approval from CN to fire off the fireworks from that yard. So we looked, where we talked about it at the staff meeting, and actually, I think it was Blaine, proposed maybe doing them up by the water towers instead, so that we fire them off from our land, sort of arcing over the village, and they might have a much better dramatic effect. Anyways, so that's the proposal right now, just to let you guys know that might be coming down the pipeline. And we're also gonna make do some work on the parking situations that we had last year. Grant writer, I'm happy to report, has applied for the Northern Healthy Communities Grant for the ice resurfacer again. So we might be doing that. Active capacity grants in. Auditors are in right now. Been talking with those guys. Things are going really well. Don't know the results yet, but that'll be coming soon enough. Met with Councillor Smith last Wednesday, and one of the things we discussed was the Peace River agreement stats and then the BC assessment issue. So this year when we go to our UBCM, we're always kind of looking for topics to talk to the ministers about. So I'd like to keep those as two of our main ones, probably for the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Just looking at the stats and then that BC assessment issue. Community center, I won't go into the details on it, but you guys had asked to have the community center policy rewritten. We're actively working on that. We found a whole bunch of gaps in it. Project's been assigned over to Alistair. One of the areas we're looking at with community center policy right now is that long-term rentals actually don't have any charges, which is kind of weird. And it bubbled up this week because we had the volleyball association from Dawson Creek apply to us to use the community center for like the next month. They 2 weeks. 2 weeks, yeah.
Or practices.
So because that fell into a long-term rental agreement, there's no area for long-term. And the first thing the president of the volleyball association said, well, we've never been charged for using that before. So we kind of went back to them and said, well, do you guys even have any members that are from Poos? Oh yeah, no problem. Okay, maybe.
Good call.
But it seems a little odd that, somebody wanting it for 1 day pays the daily fee, somebody who wants it for 4, 6, 8 pays nothing. So we're writing in some language there into that.
Taekwondo, they don't pay.
Taekwondo doesn't pay.
Never has.
No, so council still has the ability to make those one-off kind of decisions.
He makes money.
So, well, and that's something to consider too, guys. And not only does, potentially there's a revenue scenario over on their side, we're still paying to clean it up and do all of that stuff. So it's really in your guys' world to decide whether or not the community net benefit, of that event is worth the cleaning cost and so on and so forth. But, yeah, it just struck me as odd that was the way the policy was written.
I'd be curious to know how many Coos Coopy residents, you know what I mean? If they're having 50 people and there's 2 from Poos, and we're paying $300 for the cleanup, for 2 weeks cleanup. You know what I mean? We
Yeah.
have to weigh.
The answer from the president of the volleyball club wasn't oh yeah, Bob,
No,
Brent
no.
and John over here at Poos. It was just, oh yeah, we've got some members from Poos, so no problem.
I'm happy that the residents of Poos are
Yeah,
using it.
yeah, that
Well, and
was
this one is fortunate because it's during the week, so they're still able to do it as part of their regular school district cleaning. So even though they're on their 2-week spring break right now, they're still coming in for a couple hours during the day each day. So
So we're not being charged because they're cleaning.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's
Are
good.
you done?
Yeah, there was a couple other little minor ones, but they're
Do you, you're good?
not good to go.
Okay. Action items. Anybody see anything on there? So the brown ones are coming off, the ticket is what that is?
Correct.
Okay, so there really isn't very many action items?
Not that many that are ongoing, other than the ones that are, I will mention to council though too, the highway closure and the one for, community church wrap up, next Monday. So we've done the preliminary tally, I'll go over those with the council again, just in case that happens to change, but, there's definitely a clear direction from the community on which way to go on both those items.
Okay. Anybody have anything on that? No? Calendars, council calendars, March. Just moved up. Anything to add to March and April?
Yeah, I have a museum meeting April 19th.
April 19th, and Barb?
The 27th, I have a Northern Trust, 10 o'clock in Fort St. John,
On April?
March.
In March? Okay.
And Chamber of Commerce on the 3rd or 4th.
And then also. Okay. And then this kind Wednesday is our PRLGA, just reminder everybody.
So if I could mention about my calendar,
Yeah.
the Peace River Regional District have changed 2 of their dates in April, and it's because of the Kofi on April 5th. They wanted their members, their directors to go to that, so April 12th is now one of the PRD days, and April 26th. So just a couple changes there from what they were previously. I'll be attending those.
Okay. Reports, I have nothing to report this time. So Councillor Johnston?
I did attend a museum meeting. So the grand opening for this year is May 12th. They did ask if we had anything going on this year. I think they kind of liked that last year, for 75th. Remember we had
Yeah,
one?
we had
I said, no, nothing going on this year. They put in a purchasing policy in place for the curator. And they would like to know if we could donate anything for door prizes for their grand opening. Any items you want to donate? And a reminder to have the fire department block the street for that.
Okay.
It's May 12th, right, grand opening.
Tell somebody should come see me at my other hat,
Oh, okay.
character price,
I'll call that.
or even send an email.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Smith?
I have nothing to report except, I don't know, you guys probably got the letter here from the Pooskoopi Community Church leadership team in regards to the old municipal library. I kind of felt it was underhanded that they would send this out because it doesn't really spell everything out like it says lease. It sounds, when people read it, a lease, that there's money exchange. Well, they get the old library for nothing. All they do is pay the utilities. And it's kind of like, if we don't get it, look at, all the things we're not going to get. And they came to us, we didn't offer to sell it, they came to us with a intention, they would like to purchase it, but they're not considering the assessed value or anything, and I don't know, I thought it was trying to do a public relations for us to give it to them. That's my 2 cents.
Oh,
Okay.
can I speak on this?
Yeah.
So I've heard from some of the members, and one of the reasons why they put that out, and I'll just be honest about it, is when we put out ours, we didn't ask if people were in favor or against. We just put out there that if you're against this, we want to hear from you. That's the reason. And that's a valid reason, I think, because, and in both situations with the 50th Street and that one, we did not ask, please advise us if you're in favor or against. And I think that's what should happen in this case. but just, it didn't happen and it's being sent out, so you want to speak on it?
Yeah, Councilor, I can speak to that. The reason it was structured in that way, Councilor LeBeau, was to avoid the appearance of a referendum on the item. So when the municipality or any level of government goes out for that type of request, tell us whether, which way, essentially which way you vote at that point. The municipality is obligated to follow the results of the vote, and it can be challenged in court and viewed as a referendum. So by us going out, we were sort of, it was a reverse consent, I guess, if you will, where, if we know the number of people that are opposed, well, those folks that are strongly opposed will come in and fill that out. By definition, we could assume that the rest of the folks are okay with it. But we definitely get the will of the, or the sentiment of those people who are strongly opposed to it and why. But what that does is not tie council's hands to the results of that paperwork that come in. Really, it's just gauging community sentiment now at this point. You guys can choose to do still whatever you want to do with that building after that. Had we gone out with tell us, tick here if you're for it, tick here if you're against. When we got those documents back, majority wins in that case, and council would likely have been bound to, do.
But on the other hand, put the foot in the other shoe, basically you could have said it the other way, where you say, putting it out there that if you're in favor, we want to hear from you, and not ask about it.
Yeah.
If you're not in favor, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, again, that the one question could have been asked. And in this case, the question was asked, if you're not in favor, we want to hear from you. So I'm just putting that out there.
Okay.
That's the reason why that letter was sent,
Councilor LeBeau, go ahead with your report.
Yeah, okay, so I've got, basically, I attended the very next day after council on March 8th, PRD meeting in Dawson. I will be attending tomorrow's meeting in Fort St. John for the Peace River Regional District. And I'll be attending the March 28th Peace River Local Government Association booth here that we're hosting. I intend to be applying, or be going to that. And there was a Norton Trails one last Friday, but I was not well and I wasn't able to attend that one. Okay. That's my report.
And do we have, Mary, did she put anything in writing? No? Okay. Guys report in camera? None?
On Zoom.
Adjournment.
I would like to make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you.